I'm Stephen Gitelis. I'm an orthopedic cancer surgeon from Rush in Chicago. Um, and I've been associated with AlloSource since its beginning. I'm a professor, endowed professor of orthopedic oncology, and I am the medical director of the Tissue Bank of Illinois, and I direct the Rush Cancer Program. I did my fellowship in Italy in 1980, and then I went to the Mayo Clinic. And when I returned to Rush, we did not have a tumor program whatsoever. And the chairman tasked me to create one. One of the major needs back then, and even now, is you have to have access to human tissue in doing limb salvage. There was no tissue bank in Illinois back then, so we started a hospital-based tissue bank. And as the story goes, and this is a true story, my first patient was a high school quarterback in Chicago, had a tumor of the shoulder, and I was going to remove it the next day, and I searched the country for an allograft. No bank in Chicago. I ended up getting the allograft from the Miami tissue bank, one of the bigger ones then. And I met the captain at the gate. Back then you could go to the gate. There was no security. And he was carrying around a lunch bucket. And he asked me, what's in there? I said, it's a human humerus, a bone. He almost passed out. So I had this frozen bone that I was going to use the next day. I didn't know what to do with it. I had to keep it frozen. So I brought it to my home in Chicago. And we had this little tiny refrigerator freezer in my house, and it had a little freezer compartment which we had to empty out completely, and that's where I put the bone and use it the next day successfully. So I frequently credit my wife with being the first tissue banker in Illinois. So anyway, we started a hospital-based tissue bank to follow. We said we have a need, we got to have it, and that actually did well for a number of years. But it became completely clear to me that those are not going to survive for a lot of reasons, largely regulatory. The Food and Drug Administration and others were regulating tissue. So that we joined the regional organ bank of Illinois, back then called ROBI, now called the Gift of Hope. So we joined them and created a regional tissue bank in Chicago. And the way that worked is we would procure the tissue in Chicago area, and then we would find vendors all over the country to take care of these and process our tissue. The problem was the vendors were not very reliable, they were expensive, and it took a lot of time. And my dear friend Ross Wilkins, who trained at the Mayo Clinic a couple years after me, at a meeting we talked, and he said, hey, why don't you join forces with us, and we can do the processing. And thus, plus St. Louis, we formed AlloSource. So that is the beginnings of AlloSource, and this is again back around 1980-something, early 80s. So that's the story behind the creation of the tissue bank.